Okay, so we revisited my cricketing all-time 11 earlier this year from a video I did 4 or 5 years ago, and we're doing the same with football, otherwise known as soccer for North Americans, and we're revisiting my all-time football 11. Now, in order to make this squad, you've obviously the players would have had to have played in my lifetime, and also since I've been watching football. So I started watching football when I was about 2, 3 years old, in late '91, early 1992. So basically the season before the Premier League. I started watching football. The Premier League starts in 1992, the first Premier League season. So the last old Division One season, when Leeds win, is basically when I started really started watching football with my dad. Now, a lot of these players, I was really into football when these players were in their peak of performance, in their prime, playing week in, week out, regularly on the telly in the Champions League, or the old UEFA Cup, or the old Cup Winners' Cup. A lot of them played in Serie A, which had free-to-air coverage in the UK when I was a kid. This team, I've gone with the 4-4-2 formation, with a slight tweak to it with how I've set up the 4-4-2, but I've gone with the 4-4-2 formation. Because of the new 5 substitution rule, I've got a 7-man substitution bench, including 1 goalkeeper, 6 outfield players. And I will tell you now, I think this starting 11 plus bench would be competing for Champions League places in whatever top league across Europe. No doubt would be competing for cup trophies as well, and would really be a very difficult side to play against if all the players are fit. And some of these players had really long careers. Now, the substitute goalkeeper could have been the starting goalkeeper. There's about 4 other goalkeepers that could have made this team, and there's about 50 or 60 other players that could have been in and around this team. If I could select my all-time playing list of 100 favourite players that I've watched, we could be here for hours. But I've decided to go with just keeping it simple with 18 players in total, including the subs bench. So let's start with the goalkeeper. I've gone with Taffarel. May surprise some. His career obviously ended quite some time ago. But in my formative years, watching the game, he was possibly the best goalkeeper in the world at the time in the 1990s. Bar some exceptions, but in my opinion, he was the best goalkeeper of the 1990s. You could argue Fabian Barthez towards the end of the 90s, but Taffarel in his prime, at peak performance, was the best goalkeeper. Debate in the comment section below, but that's my personal opinion. If Taffarel was playing today, he would be a pretty standard goalkeeper, good with his feet, quick off his line, very, very flexible, mobile goalkeeper. Bit of a sweeper keeper. So Emmanuel Neuer's today, Taffarel was doing that in the 90s as standard. I've gone with the back four. Every single member of the back four has been a club or international captain, or both. So at right back, I've gone with Cafu. Now, you can play Cafu anywhere across the back four and in midfield, but I've gone with Cafu as a right back. The 2 centre-backs, Tony Adams of Arsenal and England fame, and Paolo Maldini of AC Milan and Italy fame. Now, Paolo Maldini I have named as the team captain. And at left-back, I've gone with Javier Zanetti. So try and score some goals past that defence, because Zanetti and Cafu, Zanetti will take corners and run up and down the left-hand side of midfield and the left wing channel as a wing-back all day. Cafu would do it down the right all day, or the left, or do a mazy run from centre back. But that's how I've set up my back four. Now, Cafu, obviously Roma legend, Brazil legend. Tony Adams, Arsenal and England. Paolo Maldini, AC Milan and Italy. Javier Zanetti, Inter Milan and Argentina. There's 4 international captains there in my back four. That is ridiculous. I know, I've gone a bit OTT. In the 90s and into the 2000s, that they were possibly the best defenders playing the game, bar none. That is possibly the best back four of all time. Debate in the comment section below, but that's my personal opinion. Now, my midfield four include, well, I've gone with a right wing, right midfield kind of hybrid, left wing, left midfield kind of hybrid. But from the right to the left, Mark Overmars on the right, Luis Figo and Michael Ballack or Mikael Ballack in the middle, and Bolo Zenden on the left. Now, you could switch Zenden and Overmars over. You could potentially, one of my subs could play instead of Zenden or Overmars. But again, in the 90s and the 2000s, that's a pretty solid midfield and wingers. Not going to lie. You got pace with Overmars. I think he was a very underrated player. Bolo Zenden, again, very underrated. You could play him more centrally, but I liked Bolo Zenden. He was very versatile and you could play anywhere across the midfield. He could do a job for you. He had a lot of skill as well and he could score some pretty good goals. Luis Figo, potentially the greatest midfielder of my generation. Just Luis Figo. Fantastic player. Did not score enough goals, but he created some great passing moves. He could tackle. He could get dirty if he wanted to. Famous for the Barcelona Real Madrid transfer where the pig's head got thrown at him and all the mobile phones, because Spanish hooligans really know how to arrest themselves by lobbing their mobile phones at a player's head. You can track them. Just saying. But how they threw a pig's head, famous for that pig's head incident. Mikhail Balak, solid, machine-like efficiency. And again, we've got some Mark Overmars, I think, potentially underachieved in his career a little bit, but on his day, unplayable. The pace he had, he could, in the late 90s, early 2000s, he was one of the best wingers or wide midfielders you could find. Mikhail Balak, solid, metronomical, machine-like, not overly flashy, but a good leader of men in the middle. And of course, you've got Bolo Zenden, who's Mr. Versatile. Now, the front two. So, sitting slightly deeper, Raul, Real Madrid legend. Also played a bit of time at Schalke, but Real Madrid legend. He had a Champions League record for goals and appearances at one point, which has since been broken, but his record for goals in the Champions League and appearances in the Champions League stood for a very, very long time for an outfield player. And then up front as his strike partner, sitting slightly further forward, Gabriel Batistuta, nicknamed Batigol, one of Argentina's greatest ever players. Obviously, one of the greatest Argentinians never to win the World Cup, which is criminal, but he did win the Copa America early in his career alongside a very young Diego Simeone. But I've gone with Batistuta right up front, Raul sitting slightly deeper as that conduit between midfield and the strike partnership. I've gone with Raul Moore potentially as an attacking midfielder rather than an out-and-out striker. And as his career went on, he did go deeper and deeper and ended up being pretty much a quarterback-style midfielder. That's my starting 11. Now let's look at the subs bench, because I've got 6 outfield players plus a pretty worldly goalkeeper. So I've gone with Taffarel as my starting goalkeeper. I've gone with Gigi Buffon as my backup goalkeeper. How can anyone say Gigi Buffon is a number 2? I don't know, but I've gone with Buffon as the second choice goalkeeper. I could have had 4 or 5 goalkeepers in this list if I really wanted to, but I've gone with Buffon on the bench. You could play Buffon as a starting goalkeeper over Taffarel, but with the lineup that I've got, I think it suits Taffarel starting potentially with the 2 wing backs that I've selected. Although the 2 centre backs I've selected, Buffon could be that option for a different style of goalkeeper, more solid, less flashy than Taffarel. Now, the rest of the bench are all outfield players in no positional particular order. So, number 13, my first substitute, Matt Le Tissier. Potentially one of the most creative midfielders and one of the best midfielders England's ever produced. They gave him a handful of caps. It's criminal that he didn't have an international career with England, really, because he played for Southampton his entire career. Again, another club captain. Alessandro Nesta is the defensive option on the bench to shake things up because Cafu can slide in. Zanetti can move forward, and Nesta can play right back and left back as well as one of the centre back positions. So I've gone with Alessandro Nesta as the defensive option off the bench. My next sub, David Bentley. You could play him anywhere in a wide area or as an attacking midfielder. So he's a very versatile player. Had good feet, good skill, a bit of physicality. And could score off free kicks from about 35 yards out. I remember a Blackburn Bayer Leverkusen European tie in the mid-2000s where he scored a 35-yard screamer from a direct free kick on a very, very choppy, muddy pitch in Leverkusen at the Bayer Arena. Fantastic, ridiculous goal. Of course, David Bentley is one of those few players, like Sol Campbell, to play for both Arsenal and Tottenham. He also played for a brief time at Norwich before going to Blackburn before going to Spurs. He also ended up playing for Rubin Kazan in Russia at one point. So his career really went a bit sideways there. He retired quite early. He lost his love for the game at an early stage. in his early 30s. He felt players were being paid too much, and I don't disagree with him. Um, my other one of my other midfield options off the bench, Emmanuel Petit, very similar to Mikel Ballack, very universal across the midfield. Could play deeper, could play further up, could play in a wider area. Mr. Versatile. Overshadowed in that French midfield by Zidane in the '98 World Cup. But Emmanuel Petit was a key component of a World Cup winning team. Also very famous at Arsenal with the Invincibles and at Stamford Bridge with Chelsea before the Abramovich era. Emmanuel Petit is a criminally underrated player. Because of Deschamps and Zidane in that solid, top quality French side of the late 90s, early 2000s, he does get overlooked, but he had a very good career in England, won a lot of trophies, and is, well, one of the most university-liked players ever to play for both Chelsea and Arsenal. Fantastic player. Strike option, who could play as an attacking midfielder, Hernan Crespo. Hernan Crespo could also play on the wing as well if need be. Had a bit more pace than Raul, so that's the option to change it up. Also, was a strike partner with Batistuta for Argentina for a while. Hernan Crespo, on his day, was one of the best goal scorers and power forwards, I think you would describe him in ice hockey, because he was quite a physical player. A bit more physicality than Batistuta and Raul. He could look after himself on a football field. Hernan Crespo, as I say, on his day, ridiculous. He could score some ridiculous goals or some tap-ins. Now, yes, his spell at Chelsea wasn't, great Hernan Crespo. That's towards the end of his career. But at Inter Milan and at Parma, fantastic player. Fantastic player in the 90s when he comes of age. As Batistuta is the best Argentinian striker at the time. He's his understudy. Brilliant player. Sort of in the mould a little bit of Diego Maradona, and sort of in the mould of some other Argentinian strikers like Kempes. Very physical, quick-footed, could look after himself, and could bring other players into play. And finally, potentially one of my favourite players of all time. I should have really had him in the starting lineup, but I've gone with him off the bench, and that's Tugay, everyone's favourite Turk. I'm sorry. The first ever game I saw Blackburn play actually in the flesh. Now I've been a Blackburn fan since yay high to a grasshopper, but when I actually finally got to go to a game, it was Tugay's debut, and he scores the winner against Southampton at St Mary's from about 35 yards out and almost broke the net. He could do that. If you're also a Rangers fan or a Galatasaray fan, you will know that Tugay can score from about 35, 40 yards out and take your head off if you're the goalkeeper. If he'd come over a bit earlier in his career to the UK, I think we would have seen prime Tugay. By the time Tugay is at Blackburn after his spell at Rangers, he's not the player he was when he first comes on the scene. In his prime, potentially as good as Zidane. And that is no joke. People have actually compared Tugay to Zidane at the peak of Zidane's powers at Real Madrid. We are not joking here. Tugay, his game evolved. He didn't. Again, very versatile in midfield. But Tugay could do things with a dead ball that I've never seen anyone else apart from Roberto Carlos do. Honestly, he did some ridiculous free kicks. A lot of power behind his shot. High energy player. Combative, you need combative midfielder. I did get booked a few times. I think he got sent off a few times. But like a terrier in midfield, stocky, low central gravity, but absolutely a workhorse. Absolute workhorse. If he could, he would play every minute of every game. So there's my team. Now let's discuss the manager to manage all these players, because to be fair, I wouldn't say there's many egos actually in this team. Ironically, this team was not really full of egos. These are all team players. You look at it. I could have gone with some of the more flashy superstar players of the 90s and the 2000s and into the 2010s. But look at the manager that I've selected. Now, originally I was going to go with Cesar Menotti, winner of the 1978 World Cup with Argentina. Obviously, the 1982 World Cup cost him his job because they fell apart. And Menotti's still alive and has coached in my lifetime. But I've gone with the late, great Brian Clough. Now, Brian Clough was potentially the best manager England never had, if not the best manager England never had. The fact that big Sam Allardyce became England manager, not Brian Clough, has Sam Allardyce has managed a game for England. Brian Clough never managed a game for England. That is a travesty. But you know, Don Revie got the England job. Look how that ended up in the 70s. Bit of a mess, really. Wasn't a really. Brian Clough would have got England to the 74 and 78 World Cups, no doubt. Don Revie gets the job. We miss out on those World Cups. Let that sink in. Yeah, Don Revie won all these trophies with Leeds. Brian Clough obviously won with Derby, but then did all that winning with a small team from the East Midlands called Nottingham Forest with no money. I think Brian Clough could manage this team pretty well, and I think this team would upset the apple cart. But you look at the team I've selected. There is a lot of leaders in that team. There's a lot of leadership there. A lot of club and international captains. Crikey, how many captains have I asked? Cafu, captain of Roma and Brazil. Tony Adams, Arsenal and England. Maldini, AC Milan and Italy. Zanetti, Inter Milan, Argentina. Figo, I believe, at points did captain club sides, or did have the captain's armband, and Portugal. Michael Ballack, Chelsea and Germany. Bolo Zenden, I believe, at some point did wear the captain's armband when required, but wasn't actually official club captain. He may have been captain for a game or two. Raul, Real Madrid and Spain. Batistuta, I do believe, wore the captain's armband for Fiorentina at points. And then you look at my subs bench: Buffon, Juventus and Italy. Letizia, Southampton. Tugai has worn the captain's armband for Blackburn and potentially Rangers. Manuel Petit, I don't remember him being a captain, but he would have been, you know, one of the leadership group at Chelsea and Arsenal in his day. Yeah, there's a lot of club and international captains there. So there's a lot of leadership. There's a lot of quality. There's a lot of international caps, a lot of international goals, and a fair few bookings in there as well. So there's a bit of ill discipline at times. But there you go. There's my all-time footballing 11 2023 edition. Place your footballing 11s plus subs bench in the comment section below. Now remember, this is all for fun. This is all subjective. There are some crossovers from the last time I did this video back in 2018, 2019, but roughly that time. There are some crossovers, but yeah, I've gone with a pretty solid balanced side where you can, you know, have a flexible formation from the standard 4-4-2, looking at the subs bench and the players that I've selected. I could go with a back three with this team if I put Nesta into the starting lineup, for example, or move Cafu over and put Nesta at right back, or had wing backs. So there is flexibility with the lineup that I've selected. But there we go. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for getting to the end of this video. And from me, thank you very much, obviously. Please place a like and a subscribe. Please leave a comment in the comment section below, and I will have some more content for you very, very soon.